Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We're always on the lookout for topics that'll really help you navigate some of the big decisions in life. And for a lot of you out there, that might include studying abroad or even thinking about migrating to a new country.
Absolutely. It's a huge step.
Huge. And for a lot of people, that journey involves taking an English proficiency test. So today, we're zeroing in on one specific test you might be coming up against. The Pearson test of English academic,
Oh,
or as most folks call it, the PTE
well,
academic.
not TTE, yeah.
To make sure we're giving you the absolute best insights, we dove deep into a really great podcast episode. The folks over at PTE Unlocked, Your Ultimate Guide to Success, had an episode called Mastering the PTE, Strategies, Tips, and Real Talk. And let me tell you, it's jam-packed with useful stuff.
Yeah, they don't mess around. It's straight to the point, really practical.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're going to do for you today. We're going to break down the PTE, what it is, how it works, how it's different from other English tests. Take a look at that scoring system, which, let's be honest, can feel a little mysterious sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit.
And most importantly, we're giving you the concrete strategies you can actually use for each part of the test. No fluff, just the good stuff. Because really, who has the time to listen to hours and hours of podcasts trying to sift through it all, right?
Right. You've got applications to fill out, essays to write. I mean, there's so much going on.
Exactly. And this is where, really understanding the PTE can make a big difference. That feeling of, oh my goodness, what is this test? What do I have to do? If we can get rid of some of that for you, I think that's a huge win.
Well, absolutely. Knowing what to expect, having a plan. I mean, that's half the battle, right?
Right. Okay. So let's get into it. First things first, PTE 101. What even is this test? For anyone out there who's just hearing about it for the first time, break it down for us. What is the PTE academic?
So the PTE academic, it's basically a computer-based test, and it's designed to assess your English language skills. It's for people who need to show how well they can communicate in English, for things like getting into a university abroad or, like we were saying, immigration purposes. It's pretty widely recognized. A lot of institutions and governments around the world accept it.
And one of the things I've heard about the PTE is how quickly you get the results back. Right.
Yeah, that's definitely a big plus.
Yeah.
Much faster than some of the other English tests out there. And another thing that sets it apart is the scoring. It uses artificial intelligence, AI, to grade the test. So the idea is it's really consistent and objective, no human bias or anything like that.
That's really interesting, especially, when you think about how language can be so subjective.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that really struck me when we were listening to that PTE Unlocked episode was how the PTE actually kind of integrates the different skills. Like, it's not just about reading, writing, listening, speaking in isolation, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes the PTE quite unique. It's not just about being good at one aspect of English. It's about how well you can use all those skills together, kind of in a more holistic way. So, for example, if your grammar isn't so strong in the writing section, the AI might actually pick up on that, and it could potentially affect your speaking score as well.
That is so interesting. It's like it's really looking for that overall proficiency, not just, are you good at writing, but can you actually use the language effectively in different contexts?
Exactly. It's a more integrated approach to assessing language skills.
Okay. So it's computer-based, AI scored. It integrates all those different skills.
Well,
What's the actual test like, though? What's the structure of the PTE academic?
okay. So the PTE is divided into three main parts. You start off with the speaking and writing section, and that's all one section. Combined. That one runs for like 54 to 67 minutes. Then you move on to reading. That's a 30-minute section. And then finally, you have listening, which can be anywhere from 30 to 43 minutes, depending on the specific tasks. So in total, you're looking at roughly 2 hours for the whole test.
All right, so a pretty concentrated 2 hours of English testing. And then what kind of score are we looking at? What's the range?
So the PTE uses a scoring scale that goes from 10 to 90. And your overall score, as well as your scores for each of the individual sections, are based on what they call communicative skills and enabling skills.
Okay. Break those down for me. What are communicative and enabling skills?
So communicative skills are things like, grammar, vocab, fluency, pronunciation, all the stuff you need to actually communicate your meaning. And then enabling skills are more like supporting skills, things like, taking notes effectively, things that help you process the language overall. And the PTE Unlocked episode mentioned that there's usually a scoring guide you can access. It breaks down exactly how each of those skills contributes to the final score.
All right, that's super helpful. So that gives us a good overview. Let's dive into the specifics of each section, starting with speaking. Because honestly, for a lot of people, that's the scariest part, right? Talking to a computer.
It can be intimidating.
Yeah. But the PTE Unlocked folks, they had some really good advice for dealing with those nerves.
Yeah. They really focused on how to feel more confident when you're speaking into that microphone, like how to make the most of that speaking section.
Right. And they started with the describe image task. So what are the key things to remember for that one?
So for describe image, you get 25 seconds to look at the image, get your thoughts together, and then you have 40 seconds to actually describe it out loud.
Right.
And a really common mistake, I said, is trying to describe absolutely everything you see. Like getting bogged down in all the little details.
Oh, yeah, I can see how that would happen. You panic and you're like, okay, there's a tree and there's a person.
Exactly. And then you run out of time and you haven't even gotten to the main point.
Right. So what's a better approach? What did they recommend?
They suggested using a template, like a structured way to describe the image. So you start with a general overview of what the image shows. Then you focus on the most important trend or data point, like the highest or lowest value if it's a chart or something. And then you wrap it up with a quick conclusion.
So it's almost like you're giving a mini presentation about the image.
Exactly. It's about showing that you can analyze the information and communicate the key points clearly and concisely.
And they had a really cool tip for how to practice for this task, right?
Oh, yeah. They said you can literally use any chart or graph you come across in everyday life, like the weather forecast, sales reports, even those infographic memes you see online.
That's such a good idea. It makes it so much more relatable.
Yeah, you're already looking at those things anyway. Might as well use them to practice.
Okay. Next up, repeat sentence. This one sounds pretty straightforward, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, yeah. There are definitely some nuances to it. They emphasize that you really shouldn't try to memorize the sentence word for word. It's more about listening for the chunks of meaning.
Okay.
And if you miss a word, don't freak out. Just keep speaking.
Yeah.
Don't pause for too long because the AI actually penalizes you for that.
Really? It's listening for those pauses.
It is. It interprets pauses as a lack of fluency, and they actually gave a really helpful example. They said, imagine the sentence is, the library will close at 6 p.m.
Okay, I see. So it's broken up a little bit.
Yeah, and you have to try to repeat it as naturally as possible, even if you don't catch every single word perfectly.
Okay. And they also had a really clever tip for this section, right? Something about recording yourself.
Yes, they said, record yourself repeating sentences, then listen back. And if you find it hard to understand what you're saying, if it sounds unclear or hesitant, then it's likely that the AI is going to have trouble understanding you as well.
That is such a smart idea. It's like giving yourself a mini mock test.
Exactly. And it can really help you pinpoint those areas where you need to improve, like your pronunciation, your clarity.
Fantastic tips for the speaking section. Let's move on to writing now. And for this one, the PTE Unlocked hosts were all about structure and templates.
Oh, yeah. They really stress that, especially for the essay task. That one, you have 20 minutes to write an essay. And they said having a clear structure is super important. They even recommended a specific formula to use.
Oh, interesting. What's the formula? Lay it on us.
All right, so you start with an introduction that basically rephrases the essay topic and states your main argument, your thesis statement.
Okay.
Then you have 2 body paragraphs. Each paragraph focuses on a different supporting point for your argument, and you give a specific example for each point.
So a classic essay structure.
Exactly. Classic and effective. And then you finish with a conclusion that summarizes your main arguments.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about the kind of language you should use? Did they talk about vocabulary?
Yeah. They said to definitely use academic vocabulary, to show off your English skills and that you understand formal writing.
Right.
But they also said, don't go overboard. Don't try to use super complicated words just for the sake of it. It's more important to be clear and make sure your ideas flow logically.
Right, no need to dust off the thesaurus for every other word.
Exactly. Clarity is key.
Okay. So then there's the other writing task, summarize written text. That one has a pretty strict word count, if I remember correctly.
It does. So you get a short passage to read, and then you have to summarize the main points in a single sentence. And that sentence has to be between 5 and 75 words.
Wow. That's pretty tight.
Yeah, it's all about being concise.
Yeah.
And the PTE Unlock team actually had a good suggestion for how to start that sentence. They said to begin with, the text discusses.
Okay, so that gives you a framework.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you weave in the key points. And they actually recommended using semicolons to link those points together.
Semicolons, I love it.
Yeah. Semicolons are your friend in the PTE, apparently. It helps you pack in more information while still sticking to the word count.
Very strategic. Okay, now They mentioned one last really crucial point about writing that I think a lot of people overlook.
Oh, yeah, the grammar thing.
Yes, even small grammar mistakes can have a big impact on your score.
Huge impact. They said things like, putting a comma in the wrong place or messing up subject-verb agreement. Those little things can really add up.
So what did they recommend?
They said to always leave at least 1 minute at the end to proofread. Just 1 minute to go back and check for any errors.
1 minute of power.
Exactly. It can make a big difference.
Okay, let's move on to reading. Now, this is where time management becomes super important.
Well, yeah, time is definitely your enemy in the reading section. But luckily, the PTE Unlocked episode had some great strategies for dealing with that. For the reorder paragraphs task, they had a really cool tip about pronouns.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that.
So they said that sentences that start with pronouns like they, it, he, or she, those are very unlikely to be the first sentence in a paragraph.
Okay, because the pronoun refers to something that's already been mentioned, right?
Exactly. So if you see a sentence starting with a pronoun, you know it probably doesn't come at the beginning.
That's such a good point. It's like a little shortcut for figuring out the order.
Yeah, a little bit of a linguistic cheat code.
Okay. What about the multiple choice questions? There are a couple of different types in the reading section.
Right. So their advice for multiple choice was to first skim the whole text, just to get a general idea of what it's about. Then go back and scan for specific information related to each question. And they also had a cool tip for eliminating answer choices. They said to watch out for extreme language, words like always or never.
Oh, right, because those are rarely true, especially in academic texts.
Exactly. They said those extreme options are often wrong.
And they also had a really important point about what to do if you're not sure of the answer.
Yes. Guess. Don't leave any questions blank because there's no negative marking in the PTE.
So even if you have no idea, just pick something.
Exactly. You've got a better chance of getting it right than if you leave it blank.
Okay, that's good to know. And to wrap up the reading section, what was their general advice about time management?
Don't get stuck on one question for too long. If you're struggling, flag it and come back to it later if you have time.
Just keep moving.
Keep moving.
Okay. Last but not least, listening. This one feels like it's all about being a good note taker.
It is. You got to be quick with that pen and paper. And for the summarized spoken text task, the PTE Unlocked team recommended using the 5 W's and the framework for note-taking.
The 5 W's. Okay, remind me, what are those again?
Who, what, when, where, why.
Oh, yeah, that makes total sense. It helps you capture the most important info.
Exactly. It's a way to make sure you're not just writing down random things. You're focusing on the key elements.
Okay, what about highlight incorrect words? Any tips for that one?
So for this task, you basically get a transcript of what's being said, and you have to identify any words that don't match the audio. And their tip was to follow the transcript with your cursor as you listen.
Okay, so you're both listening and reading at the same time.
Exactly. It helps you catch those little discrepancies between the text and the audio.
Clever. All right, now, write from dictation. This one can be tricky. What did they suggest for that?
So for write from dictation, you hear a sentence and then you have to type it out word for word. And their backup strategy was to jot down the first letter of each word as you're listening.
Okay, like a little code.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can't remember the whole sentence perfectly, you've got those first letters to jog your memory.
That's brilliant. It's like a little safety net.
It is.
Yeah.
It can really help if your mind goes blank.
Mm.
And one last important thing they mentioned about listening is the accents.
Oh, right, the accents. Tell me about that.
So they said the PTE academic intentionally includes a variety of English accents. You might hear British, Australian, North American.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Right.
sorry. Yeah, and they said the best way to prepare for that is to just practice listening to different accents as much as you can. Get used to those different ways of speaking.
Makes sense. You don't want to be caught off guard on test day.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the PTE Unlocked episode finished with a Q&A, and there was one question that I think is super relevant for anyone preparing for this test. It was about how long you should study for.
Oh, yeah, the million-dollar question.
What was their answer? How long do you need to prep for the PTE?
So they said it really depends on your current level of English. If you're already pretty fluent, they said maybe 2 to 4 weeks of prep is enough.
Okay.
But if you're not as confident, especially with speaking, then they recommend giving yourself more time, maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
Makes sense. And did they say anything about how much you should study each day?
They said to aim for about 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
And they really emphasized the importance of doing timed practice tests. to get used to the format, the time pressure, all of that.
Okay, that's super practical advice. So it sounds like the big takeaways are to really understand the PTE format and to have specific strategies for each section.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing English. It's about knowing how to take the test.
Right, and I think whether you're actually planning to take the PTE soon or you just wanted to get a better understanding of English language assessments in general, that episode was so insightful.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening.
And it makes you think, with AI becoming more and more sophisticated, how is that going to change the way we learn and the way we prove our skills in the future? It's pretty fascinating to think about.
Definitely. It's a whole new world of assessment that we're moving into.
It is. So, if you're interested in learning more, we highly recommend checking out that PTE Unlocked, your ultimate guide to success podcast. It's a fantastic resource. You can find it on all the major podcast platforms.
Seriously, give it a listen. They go into a lot more detail, have some really interesting stories and examples. It's a great way to prepare if you're thinking about taking the PTE.
And that's it for today's deep dive. We'll catch you next time, right here on The Deep Dive.